people are starting to come in and ask if we are going to carry that record. And I was like, I got to go. If they turn it over when this comes in, they're going to be like, you're the guy on that cover.
Basically, our podcast is about your whole journey in music. I don't know if you mind talking about Wonder Years stuff. I mean,
no, absolutely. And honestly, full disclosure, if this is like in part of the episode and we're already going, we never had an official start for anybody that was listening. We're just in
I never have an official start.
And that's brilliant. And I love it. And I was sensing that. So I, just kept going with it. And I think those are sometimes the best. But yes, absolutely. Let us talk about Wonder Years, because that is kind of the origin of a lot of these ideas and thoughts that I do now have.
Rad. Awesome. I just wanted to clarify, because sometimes I'll talk to someone like, I'm in a new band. I don't really want to touch on the old stuff. So I love that you're willing to talk about it. Most of the time people are cool with it. So
yeah. We're heavily touching on the old stuff, so much so that we're playing our oldest 2 records back to back every night for 2 months in a row starting next week. So
I know, that's so awesome. You're playing Broken Bull here in Nashville too.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm excited. Saturday night, which is so good because I have 2 kids and I don't have a huge community down here, so it's hard to find babysitting, but I think I could find somebody on a Saturday night.
You know what's a great way to build community? Going to the old punk rock show.
I know.
Even for people of our age, and you won't be the only one in your age bracket there. Well, at least we'll be there as well. So you'll be like, the guys on stage are also right here with me and feeling right. But no, I am excited for that. Actually, we haven't played Brooklyn Bowl in Nashville. So I'm stoked to see that. And yeah, it's not always, Nashville doesn't always fall on a Saturday or Sunday on like a weekend. So I'm actually stoked this time around that it does. That'll be great.
Yeah, it's super rad. I saw that. And I haven't, dude, full disclosure here, I haven't really been to any shows since I moved to Nashville. I've been here nearly a year. But COVID happened, I got kids, and it's like, it never really worked. And now I'm seeing people come through and I'm like, okay, I need to go. I need to go see the Wonder Years at the Brooklyn Bowl. It's a Saturday. Let's do this.
That's right. I would say that is a strong decision and a well thought out choice. For anybody that's listening that might be on a fence in another city, come on, you got to pick one. It just takes a commit, put it on the calendar, find the sitter, do whatever you need to do,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm hyped. I'm going to go see that. Well, on your recording stuff, did you record that you put out a song, in 2020 with Wonder Years, a new one?
So we put out a couple things over the last couple years. So as far as that goes, with new material, we did a kind of like a deluxe anniversary box set re-release of Upsides. And actually, what we kind of conceptualized as a cool, like, deluxe addition to that package was taking a few songs, or ideas, I should say, from that era that were like straight up like voice memos or very raw, unflushed out, unfinished demos that of songs that, were from that era in a way, but never got finished, never made the record and just kind of like hung out and hung around. And we went back to those ideas and thought, well, wouldn't this be an interesting like time capsule project to go now have the current iteration and evolution of the Wonder Years and of ourselves as musicians and people to go back and finish that work. But now, take the ideas that we, were conjured up in that time and place. So they fit right in line with a lot of the themality and aesthetic of that record. But we get a chance to now kind of do the mulligan thing where like, well, if, I'm relearning all of the, and like rehearsing all of these songs, I'm like, if I had that to do over, I'd definitely write something less cheesy, or whatever it is. Right. You're your own worst critic in hindsight's 2020. But so we actually gave ourselves the opportunity of doing that with 2 ideas, and they yielded 2 songs, one called Out on My Feet and one called Breakless.
Breakless is the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. Okay. So we did 2 of those tracks, and we actually, to further the concept of that time and place idea, we brought back Mr. Steve Evitz, who actually produced Suburbia, and Mr. Vince Ratty, who actually produced Upsides and recorded Upsides, mixed both of those songs, and Steve produced remotely, actually quite similar to this, where we piped him in via FaceTime to the studio and kind of went back and forth as we were tracking on our end. So it was a really interesting project to have everybody that has kind of shaped the early years and those early records of Wonder Years all back in the same fold. And admittedly so, that was not the last time that dream team would be assembled. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There's some other things in the pipeline for this year that I think Wonder Years fans will probably be somewhat interested in.
That's awesome. Well, you answered my question because I was wondering if you produce the records, and especially through your studio. But it sounds like you grabbed the old people that helped you on the original records, and okay.
Yeah, just to have those takes, to have those opinions. And it's an interesting thing. We have a really, I mean, everybody says this, but I am very lucky to be a part of a team that has so much talent and taste and perspective, and there's a large number of us that are also very much excited with like the audio nerdery and the production. Shocker here, it's the guitar players so when it comes to the actual production and tracking stuff, we have done stuff early days. We did our own demos, and we still do for every record, go through that writing and pre-production process where we, record live demos and make the changes and refine them to a pretty finished point before we get into the studio with whoever's doing it. But we also make the calculated choice of bringing in an outside voice, as though our band didn't have enough people with 6. We kind of bring in an honorary 7th member to play the role of tiebreaker in a lot of the on the fence decisions, and to have some of that objectivity, for one, not necessarily because we don't feel that there's a competent enough of talent that I feel like I couldn't engineer or produce a great Wonder Years record, but it would be a Wonder Years record with the caveat of having been produced by Casey, or having, you know what I mean? And that does two things. That's a lot for anybody. You look at nowadays a lot, the amount of hats that, current producers, especially in our genre, are asked to wear. It's, I just had an interview. I'll give it away. Later in the year, there's an episode with a producer, a great guy, Mike Pape, that's done a ton of cool stuff in the world. Go look him up. But so look out for that episode on the record process coming in a few months. But we were talking about the same thing, where it's like you're asked to be the engineer, the producer, also the band therapist, also the hospitality and day runner, because it's just you in the studio with an entire band. And that's a lot. And shit falls through the cracks, maybe on the engineering end, or maybe you're too focused on getting something sonically that you're not realizing that your singer's over there, like ready to have a nervous breakdown, and you could have had some more attention to that. So we never want to task any one member at any time with that overwhelm at any point in the process. We want everybody to kind of be free and just be able to put forward all of their ideas and in general stuff, and then have somebody else that handles all of that. And then if there is ever, a discrepancy or like creative uncertainty about where we're going with something, it's not, well, so-and-so's at the board, so they can just, choose to, do it this way or do it that way, that you kind of extend the reins to that. So that's a calculated choice that we've never actually I would say we have a heavy hand in obviously how the songs come together and what they sound like. And I think anybody that would hear the live demos, pre-studio demos that we come into that process with, and how the records, they'd be like, oh, these aren't far off at all. It's not like it's, and sometimes that might be different. It's different with every band and every songwriter and every production team. But for us, we come in pretty dialed in, but there are a lot of moments where it's like, we want that 7th member to be like, hey, honestly, I don't want to rock the boat right now. I just want the vibe and the team to stay whole and cohesive. So you make the call so we can all be mad at you, and so that you can catch all of the things on that end while we're worrying about just playing and the parts and being as cohesive as a unit as possible. So, yeah, so that's why we've never done it that way. But,
okay.
short of a few tracks, we did put out a Christmas song for the first time in a while last year. It was called Threadbare, and I loved it. And that was actually done and engineered and produced remotely. So I tracked, some guitars, harmonies down here. My other guitar player tracked the drums up in Philly at his place. And, so we brought that all together. But that was kind of, a special exception that we were like, hey, let's just put this together quickly and have some fun. It's no big, like, grandiose. We're not trying to win a Grammy here with this Christmas song. We're just trying to make a nice moment with a song and a musical idea that we had in the background. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you about the podcast real quick. I know I'm jumping all over the place because you're just so. I love your vibe, man. You're just like you know a lot about everything. So it's cool to hear all these stories. I really dig it. But
I never thought I'd say this. It must be a Southern thing,
Well, I'm curious because on the podcast, your podcast, The Record Process, do you interview? Because I listened to the latest episode before I talked to you, which was, it's great. I love what you guys are doing, and it's very technical talk about how to record and put these records together. Do you interview somebody in the industry on every episode?
So this is perfect timing, and I love that you asked that question because actually, interestingly enough, this is kind of the calm before the storm, so to speak, where everybody's like, oh, I checked out that show, or like I heard about that show, and I'm just like, that was season 1, and I'll give you a little bit of the origin story as to why season 1 will be will act from here on out as more of a precursor and laying the like foundational, almost like textbook groundwork before you go out into the wild and apply all of those things. Because yes, season 2 is coming, and we'll start with the first episode on February 8th, and it's all interview based. And
awesome.
So yeah, and not only is it all interview based, one episode or one interview each week with a specific guest, we actually talk about a specific release from their career, from their discography.
Oh,
so
cool.
So not only are we kind of taking the whole process in a linear fashion that we talk through myself, Tom and Adam on the first season, which was more of just hey, we love having these conversations about the different, nerdery and different ways to approach, each phase of making a record, because we kind of were doing it, in the studio with clients and with our own, music that we're making together. We realized that we loved having those conversations about, oh, well, like we could do it this way, or this is actually like we might get this kind of result if we treat it and approach it this way, and have just been, I think the older you get, the more you get fascinated with even just the process itself, and not less of the result, but it starts to balance out more. Whereas maybe when I was younger, I was more focused on trying to hold the result to a series of expectations, and so that was why we were like, hey, let's put this into a format where we can kind of focus the energy in some of these talks that we love having and are having in the studio from week to week anyway. Put a microphone in front of us and kind of organize it so that maybe anybody that's interested or curious about that journey and wants a behind the scenes look and maybe some tips or info for what they were doing, it might be there, so that will live there as that guide. And then about halfway through it, we realized, oh, what this actually is the precursor to then both expanding and narrowing the focus, expanding by taking it out into the universe and realizing there are an infinite amount of incredible records that have been made, all of which have a different story behind them. Things that relate to the time, the place, the things that were, inspiring them, the people that collaborated on them. And they all shape how those records turn out. But then also narrowing it to the perspective of whichever person was specifically involved in that process and the perspective. By that, I mean, if it was the musician, the artist themselves, right? Whether it was a band or, a solo like singer-songwriter, or if it was the producer, what their side of that whole process looked like trying to work with the band, what their role was and how they saw it and their story and how it kind of changes on their side, all the way to people that, are charged with, once a record is made, bringing it to its audience and shaping that creative vision all the way through, even on like the publicity side or the marketing end of it, from a label and an industry perspective, which is kind of cool. Like, I think
that's super cool, because that's what that applies to even this podcast. I would love to listen to that to see how you market your band, because you're essentially marketing a business, right?
Right. Exactly. No, totally. And so there's so many parallels, which is why actually I love that we left off and ended season 1 with an episode specifically about that, because I think a lot of times when people talk about the creative process and interview musicians, producers, people in that world, they forget that there is an artistry that extends well beyond just the finite timestamp of a record musically. There's the artwork that goes into it. There is the tour, stage setup that coordinates with that, and how they bring that vision and sow that throughout, that ultimately makes, a casual, I like that song, but I don't know who it's by. It's just on this Spotify playlist that I listen to right. I am obsessed. This is my new favorite band, and this will now consume the next 5 to 10 years of my life musically, and I will be at every show, and I will be, and sometimes, an audience, I kind of use the Tree Falls analogy a lot, where it's like, if someone makes an incredible record, but they don't know like where to go with it or where to put it out, it's like, there's a lot of, especially nowadays, if you put it on Bandcamp, they will come, it's like, that is not true either. And I think that people, what this modern climate is really challenging artists to do, aside from wear 1,000 different hats and feel super overwhelmed and anxious every second of the day that they're not doing enough, which that's a whole other journey that I unpacked with some, with some of my coaching clients and younger artists that are trying to develop their identity. But it really is asking them to build a world for other people to kind of come live inside and know and really resonate with on a level outside of just the sonics of a song, and really what those songs are actually representing behind the scenes. So there's a lot in there. And that's why I ending with that episode was kind of the perfect transition point to what we will now do with some awesome episodes, talking, like I said, with publicists, mixing engineers, the bands themselves, the songwriters behind them, people that normally you would throw on the like really boring like business end of things, that have a better like hand on the pulse of what an artist or band was doing than maybe some of the people that were involved in the actual making of that, than a mastering engineer or a mixing engineer. Like, it's wild how all of these things coincide, and so many of these thoughts and decisions get made or get, highlighted along the way, and it's all kind of, boiled down to, like I said, the time, place, and the people that are involved. And it's so fascinating, because I truly, I'm like chomping at the bit, and much in the same way of like when we have a new Wonder Years record that hasn't seen the light of day yet, which, not that I would know anything about that firsthand currently right now at this time, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And we're no stranger to that phase of being in a band, and that excitement where you have a record that's wholly yours, but you want so badly for everybody to see it and enjoy it in the same way. That's how I feel with this season of the record process that we're about to roll out, because these interviews, I not only have such genuine enjoyment from them, but I think there's so many incredible lessons that I'm just like, I am so glad you showed up and said yes to this, because what you just put out there is a perfect example. You can't actually put it into words better. And now anyone listening, just like I will have that idea reinforced and remember that story, which is ultimately, I think, the best way to kind of, if you're looking for not just to be entertained, but to also take away some things, which are what I look for in some of my favorite podcasts. I kind of, took that, and with my co-host went to set forward to try to like bake that into a show too, so that it was like, hey, go make a show that you'd want to listen to, and that's kind of what I'm doing, where I'm lucky enough to be like, hey, I had had a couple people I could call from spending some time, around this, and tried to curate a really cool cross section of unique voices, perspectives, and albums that aren't just in, the Wonder Years genre, but kind of pull from outside lessons that are ubiquitous, and span across genre and time. So, a lot said there, but I am excited is what that all boils down to.
So you're not keeping it genre specific then. So it's not all people within the world that the Wonder Years lies in.
No, it is not.
Okay.
But I will say that, as one might imagine, having spent so much time in here, there were a few friends right out of the gate that I was like, man, the timing of this is too good. There were a couple other friends that, like you would imagine, also gave birth to some pretty important records in the genre just over a decade ago and are also celebrating those. Maybe I'm talking about a band that is notoriously paraded around the genre as a flagship artist from Tallahassee. And if you didn't quite pick up on that, yes, see the first episode on February 8th is going to feature the wonderful speaking voice of Mr. Derek Sanders and Brooks Betts from Mayday Parade, who were talking about their self-titled album. So that was an awesome one, and I was like, this is perfect. They're going to be out hitting the road, starting a full international run to commemorate that record and its place in the scene and genre. So there will be plenty of crossover into our world if someone is a Wonder Years fan already coming into this show. So don't worry. And also there are some Wonder Years specific nuggets in there too. We knew we would not escape, and we came prepared. So and they will follow shortly behind that episode, actually.
That is awesome, because I've interviewed two people that I think would be awesome for your show, and I would love to hear how they and maybe you've already interviewed them. I don't know.
Who are they?
Will Putney. He's in a band called Fit for an Autopsy, but he's produced like a bunch of records. Every Time I Die.
I have to, full disclosure, I am very well aware of Will and his work. And not only that, but my barber in Philly, who I miss dearly, is in his new band, The End. So,
okay.
So
and I was going to say, he's a Jersey guy too.
Right. And honestly, I know I will get there, and I know a lot, and he's already made the rounds on a lot of really cool podcasts and shows that talk, specifically about, the production stuff and the technical stuff. But he's made some killer records. So I'd love, if for any reason, Will, you're listening, I'm going to have Jay hit you up about this very soon. And that's the other kind of interesting thing, where there's so many great ones that people are like, well, what about this? What about this? I'm like, honestly, keep them coming. I'm putting them all in an Excel list, and I'm like, I want to do every one, but I also realize, that doesn't work with their schedules and or mine to just do 9 hours a day of episodes, even though I would love it. So all in due time. Who's the second one though? And maybe you could, as someone that has already spoken with them, give us a friendly recommendation.
Oh, of course. I will send him a message right out of here. Brian McTurnan. Have you interviewed him before?
We have not. So see, like I said, because we're just getting rolling with the new format, there are so many good ones. And man, do I know he has made one or two records that probably have a story behind them.
Oh, yeah.
Or that I know have a story behind them, actually.
He's done Thrice records and Hot Rod Circuit records and Circus Survive records and, Hot Water Music. His list is insane.
It's pretty nutty.
He would be great for your show. And
well, I'd love to
have
Brian, if you're listening, obviously you know where to find us. We're, very, very approachable on the internet and outside of it. I'm usually just at my house down here in Georgia. So, or you'll know where I'll be for the next 2 months if you just want to hop on to the Wonder Years tour date listing.
Sure. But you might be playing a show with him. He's in a band called Battery. And they do a lot of those, festival-ish shows. So
yeah.
Anyway, those are two people that came off the top of my head. I'm like, these are two people that would be rad on your show.
See, and this is what's incredible, because the whole goal of this was kind of to expand the conversation and get people and anybody listening to be like, this is my favorite record and I heard this one thing, or I'm always curious why it, came out like this as opposed to their other records. That is what we love kind of playing detective and getting to the bottom of. And I find so interesting, especially with older records, that have kind of impacted a ton of the lineage, that came after them. But also new records. And that's kind of the cool thing too, where there are a few records and artists that we speak with that we have ready to go in this first season that are maybe less of a, I'll say, household name as the like Mayday Parades, the Bryces, the Circles, like some of those, huge records, but are doing some incredible things right now, and I think should have a spotlight and have an awesome story about their process behind it that yields really unique results. So that's actually also what I was like, oh man, like, well, if at least a couple people are going to listen to it, it's like, you can't serve everybody, but maybe you can put something in front of someone to be like, yo, this is now my new favorite band, because I listened to the episode with them and then went and listened to it, and my mind was doubly blown,
Sure.
Or the other way, you see it coming down, you're like, I've never listened to that record, let me go listen to it. You're like, what the hell? And then you get into it, and then you go listen to the episode, choose your order. But I love doing that stuff anyway, where I'll see people come up on my show. Maybe it's happening now where people are like, who the frig is this Casey Cavaliere? And then they're like, well, he talks a lot, but the show is cool, or whatever it might be. So
yeah. I love it. So I figured those would be two people that I knew off the top of my head that I was like, okay, these would be great. But I want to talk about the Wonder Years, and I actually want to talk about how you got into music. Are you originally from Lansdale, Pennsylvania? I read that the band's from there. Are you from there?
The band is from there. I'm from not far from there. It's interesting. It's a 50-50 split, yet Lansdale kind of became our home, even though the other three of us went to a different high school that was like 20 minutes down the road in like Ambler, Bluebell area. But yeah, that general area. And Lansdale had the scene that we came up in like VFWs and gymnasiums and stuff like that. So we're all from that area, and we all played, as you might imagine, in different bands previous to Wonder Years. And that's how we kind of met each other, knew each other. I went to high school, like I said, with my bass player and my drummer. And it was kind of a end of high school. All of us were wrapping up and getting ready to ship off to college. And I mean, the origin of that is pretty much just like, well, this like pop punk thing is kind of a side pleasure of everything that we're listening to right now, and kind of this like thread of commonality amongst all the different, between all the different bands and styles that we were playing in. So we got together and we were like, I don't know, let's just kind of jam on something like that. And I'll, just because I've already talked a lot, and some of the rest of the origin might be out there on the internet anyway. The rest was history, as they say, but it was a little bit more of a lighthearted history in the beginning, as the lyrical approach was in no way, rich with depth, and the metaphors were more stand-up comedy and cartoon strip than they were, deeply illuminating and awakening and resonant into personal experience. So, and we then slowly transitioned. We were having fun at first, which I think helped us not hold on to things too much, too quickly, which I think is sometimes a pitfall that a lot of bands are like, we got to do this. Like these promo photos that were taken on the train tracks or in front of this abandoned warehouse have to look so legit, right? And while they do look legit, that's not, always the recipe for like incredible longevity, right? Not in those things. So we were able to have fun early on. That got us kind of through a slower transition into, hey, we want to keep playing together. We like this genre and this style. It all feels genuine to us. The only thing that doesn't really feel like super genuine are the lyrics and or things we're writing about. So maybe let's lean into some things that have a little bit more substance that we can all get behind, and leave it there. So that was kind of how the Wonder Years came together as a band. And then I, played obviously like in high school bands, and of the school discipline and outside of it.
You're in band in school?
Oh, I was deeply entrenched in the world of marching band,
Right.
being made fun of by football players, all the good stuff, looking super great in my uniform as a somewhat overweight, plump trombone player. But it's high school's an awkward phase, man. And
It's funny that I love that you're saying this because my son is in middle school. I have a son in middle school and one in kindergarten. But the middle school one, he's in chorus right now, and he gets pissed off every time I bring this up to somebody on the show. But I don't really care. He's in chorus right now. He thinks he's gonna get made fun of, yet he's never got made fun of. And I'm like, why do you care once you get to like? He's like, in high school, I'm gonna get bullied and blah blah blah. And I'm like, and to ask you, how many of those people that were in the football team ever amounted to anything and even left that area? Probably not a whole lot of them.
well,
If you're peaking in high school and you're bullying kids, the chances of you, I mean, you're in a huge band now. How much would they be like, oh man, I wish I was in that band?
Well,
Like,
and what I mean, and yes, there is sometimes truth to that narrative that you're mentioning. But to be fair, I like to take more of a, I guess, empathetic approach and realize any of that negativity or bullying is usually most likely forged out of a deeper rooted insecurity. And some of those I like to think, and I've even seen it and felt it and heard it. Some of those people will come around and be like, I was deeply an asshole. And I was because I was trying to make the other people in my friend group laugh. I was just trying to you know what I mean? So it's like,
I like to hear that though, because my personal experience, I've seen people that I went to high school with, and when I was doing stuff on the radio in San Diego, they'd like come, then all of a sudden they want to be best friends with me, but then they're kind of like still a dick. And I'm like, dude, we're not 14, 15 years old anymore. I understand that you still live with your parents or whatever in the same city we grew up in. Now you have an apartment with 3 other guys that went to our high school. That's funny that you said that. I'm glad to hear that, because some of the experiences I've personally had, I'm just like, what happened? Why are you still living in that world?
Right. Well, and you know what I mean? And I look at that, and some people do evolve and grow, but also, like I said, high school is a weird, awkward time, and you fall into different, different pockets, almost as like a form of survival.
Right.
And so, I mean, to your son, I would say, listen, if you truly love singing and you love chorus and you like the people that are there, lean into that, do it for yourself. Because the end of high school will come. The end of high school will come very quickly. So don't try to like wish it away, sounding truly like a dinosaur now. But the other thing that I would say is, like, the second you get out of that and further, into your life, you realize, high school was such a small microcosm and example of everything else out there. And like, well, chorus was just one period of the rest of my day. Like, there's a world where if that's really what you love to do, chorus can become every period of your day. You know what I mean? And the world looks a lot different when you start to realize that. And sometimes you don't realize that until you're much older. But the football player mentality, it's like those people will always be there, but you can go suss out way more common-minded people that will be way more supportive of what you're doing once you get out of high school, because it's like right now it might only be like 15, 20 kids in a chorus class, and like half of them you're like, that's not my person, that's not like, that's fine, we're all here singing, but whatever. It's like the second you get out, it's like, hey, I love singing this style. It's like, the world is your oyster, and there are going to be 700,000 people on the internet doing covers and vocals that specifically resonate with you. And it's really easy to go and find those people. And now more than ever, kind of just like have a, even if it starts digitally or whatever, it's like it brings the world to your door and all of those people, and you realize you're not alone. The older you get, the more you realize you're not alone, in the same way that you and I realize that we are not alone in terms of being extroverted introverts, right? And
Exactly.
so he will finally be like, hey, how I don't have to deal with them if I'm just doing like YouTube collab things remotely, and I can do that. It's like, and so a lot of those ideas, it's very narrow focused, because you don't realize the potential of where you're going to go. So just let him continue to chase that. And if you're enjoying it and he's getting enjoyment out of it, I mean, yeah, well, hopefully you can curse because I think I've already done it. But in a less glamorous way of saying it, fuck the haters,
Right.
because they're not going to be there forever. And don't let them right now in the short run divert your path if it's something that really feels good and genuine to you, because that genuine passion is something that a lot of those people will be missing later in their life. And for that, it's very sad. And I do feel for them because I've seen people that don't have that passion or that got rid of that passion because someone made fun of them relentlessly for it. And then I've seen people that didn't get rid of that passion and steered through it. And some of them are extremely successful in the conventional visibility and metric sense. And others of them might not be, but they're maybe some of the happiest and most fulfilled people that I've ever met are the people that steered through it. And whether or not, people are recognizing them or they're, steer into the celebrity metric of that. So if you want to be a happier person, steer into that now and be honest with yourself, because the rest will kind of start to clear out and play out and you'll be, I think, better for it. I'm better for it because I just kept doing my marching band thing because I liked the people that were around me and I liked what I was doing,
I love that. So you said trombone.
Yes, I did play trombone.
When is that the first instrument you learned?
It was, honestly. I mean, I think, there's probably, my dad was in bands years, in the 70s, he played bass. So there were a few basses lying around the house. Yeah. So I probably picked those up. There was an old, classical guitar, acoustic that was really beat up. That I think I remember him teaching me Day Tripper, or something on boom, cool. And I was like, oh, that's so sick. Probably took me 5 weeks to actually get initially. But so that was in an interesting thing. And I wasn't even a Beatles fan back then. I hadn't actually heard the song. My dad taught me the riff before I'd ever actually heard the song. Interesting thing. Yeah, so that was probably the first stuff I had noodled around with, short of the recorder they put in your hand in third grade or whatever it is. But yeah, and then that was kind of junior high, and then I played that, and then guitar, all through high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever see your dad play, or did he quit the band prior to you?
No. I never saw him play. I honestly, I just kind of heard bits and fragments of the story, and mostly was just aware of it because I saw the leftover couple tour amps and or guitar bass cases around that were in the crawl space or the attic or whatever. And then it wasn't until junior high when I kind of broke them out. I was like, does this amp work? It was oh my God, it shakes the house. Yeah, it works. But no. So, and like I said, short of just kind of connecting and seeing him freak out over some of those classic rock records that were his favorite. Never saw him play in any bands or whatever. But I feel I got the essence from just looking back at some of the old promo photos of that era where I'm just that Almost Famous movie. You guys were basically Stillwater. You guys were the Three Dog Night version of Stillwater with long hair, bell bottoms, and a sequined bedazzled shirt with one button at the bottom done and the rest of the chest hair hanging. I was cool, I got that vibe. Okay, get it. So even though I didn't see them play, there's video of all the other Doobie Brothers bands in that same era that were releasing records on some of those labels that I was I feel you're fitting in. I see where you were. You were on the the beginning of the bill and broke up before you got to the top of the bill, but you had your go, you had your time, and I can picture what that would probably be like, wearing
cool.
2-inch platform shoes, all this stuff where I'm just yeah, that's why you got a bad back now. I get it. Also, I spent 2 decades stomping around in vans on hardwood VFW floors, and now my back hurts.
Right.
Well, I get it.
I mean, he must be very supportive of you in the band.
He is. I mean, he's super stoked, and he's still we laugh about it to this day, where I think when he saw that spark awaken and him and my mom, he was probably just this incredible, oh man, I've never been so excited, but also I've never been more terrified, because he kind of had lived through it. He's oh no, right. and thank God it's some parents could probably just be absolutely not. I did that. I know how twisted that world is. Go play football. You know what I mean?
Right.
Please don't do that. And he was in no way like that. He totally got it. He's once the bug bites you, it's you're kind of there. And he was super supportive. They let us, starting at probably 12 years old, let us make so much horribly uncohesive noise upstairs in the attic for so many years. So and I appreciate it. It was, you got to get the bad stuff out, and they let us.
Sure. That's really cool. That's really cool. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you were, in bands and in the scene with the other guys in the Wonder Years, playing in different bands, and then you guys kind of came together and were like, we should do something together. Like, how did the initial band begin? I mean, what was it like? You all were just going to focus on this? Were you not going to school? Like, how did that come together? And you were like, we all want to just do this. This is what we're going to do forever.
Like I said, it was a very long like groundswell to that point, because we knew that we were going to college. We knew, it's like I said, we weren't taking it seriously, but we knew that genre was something that none of us had like wholly leaned into or explored with it, with the band. So we were like, well, let's write something like that. That's like power chordy, more in the world of that kind of like Blink, Green Day, Motion City soundtrack type stuff that was starting to, that was popping off and having a moment back then. And that we were all listening to and fans of anyway. So that was pretty much it. And, got together as like this will be a fun little side project thing. Not even in the sense of like, let's go write an EP, let's get serious, in the sense of like, let's jam and maybe like we'll write a song. And, then our singer was like, so in terms of what I should do here, should I write like real lyrics or joke lyrics? And obviously all of us are like, oh, definitely joke lyrics.
That was the thing. I mean, right. Blink was the biggest band on the planet when it came to that stuff.
Right. And so, I mean, and he like in his like very astute, creative sense, really leaned into the joke lyric world building, which I think is interesting, because that world building, it's like, those are all really thought out, ideas and concepts, like dressing up these jokes and things like that. So I look back on it and I'm just like, we don't play, a lot of those songs anymore, but I still get a chuckle. And I'm just like, I can't believe that's where we went with it. Some of them are just like, could have done without that one, but I think that's part of the learning process, and I do still think there was, ironically enough, not trying to overdress it, but there was some artistry there, even in those lyrics at times, in the same way that there's artistry in like slapstick physical comedy. It's like, does it make you laugh? Well, I guess it worked. It wasn't the most highbrow witty thing always, but you remember it, and it elicits a reaction. So
sure. I mean, well, you guys got picked up pretty soon. I mean, No Sleep Records picked you up pretty quickly, right? Not pretty quickly, but they started putting out your first EP.
Yeah, so we put out, we like self-released a split with another band in our hometown, I think, and I think it was kind of shortly after that got reviewed by one or two things, like a UK publication and a few other things, and I guess that's when the conversation started, and so then we made that full length, and then we toured on it, had some fun, and then we also put out a 7-inch, which was kind of more of a turning point into the middle ground of real and fiction and joke lyrics. That was kind of a transitional point, and that was like pre Upsides. So Upsides was like the first, like taking that that band approach and kind of the identity we had started building, and evolving it just a little bit more into something that was a little more, a little more worthy of us to like stand behind. There were still some lighthearted moments on there and some character things that, I think you see and were a natural progression of not completely flipping the switch on the, the songs and themes, and the way we treated things previous to that. But, it was definitely,
when did you realize, like, were your shows getting bigger? Like, at what point you're like, this is something that is is working, we should do it? I mean, you did a whole tour right before putting out that first record, and that's what kind of drew the attention of other labels and other things. Like, at what point are you like, let's do this, let's hit the road, let's really put our all into this band?
Yeah, so like I said, we it was kind of we were all in school, so we knew when we were slated to kind of be finished up with that. and we'd still been playing some local shows, and coming back from school on the weekends to play like Thursday, Friday, Saturday runs, and in the Northeast and stuff. And we saw people that were like, hey, I like that EP, or and started to see a little bit of that. And then we did a full US like van tour. Some of the shows were very not good, and sometimes we were like, we're all the way across the country and there's some people here, that are, getting into it and feel like they're as excited and amped as we are to be out here on the West Coast. So like, we noticed it early, but it wasn't like an overnight thing by any means. And the story of our band, I don't think, is that of an overnight success, which I kind of like. It's more of a slow and steady burn in a lot of ways, where there have been like spikes, and serious like plateaus and milestones moments, some of which being the release of Upsides and the release of Suburbia. But we've always kind of grown steam to an interesting place where we're, I think in terms of like categorical like metrics and or numbers and or like awareness of our band, we're, at this many years later, like 15 plus years in, like kind of at the top of it, where more people than ever are at least aware of it and or have like a relationship with it, which is really cool to know and acknowledge. But I think when we were finished college, and I'll actually say there, a couple ways, and we discussed what we wanted to do. Were people willing to like, post college, take the shot and spend a year and tour on it? And we were all kind of in on that. I think for me, actually, I was working at a mall retail store, and this was like right before Upsides was coming out. And I think when I was like, oh, people are starting to like, I'm behind the counter, I'm like, people are starting to come in and ask if we are going to carry that record. And I was like, I got to go. If they turn it over when this comes in, they're going to be like, you're the guy on that cover. And I was like, and that was also cool. But then other employees there were just like, is that going to be weird for you when your record's like sitting right across, the kit from the counter, at the on the listening wall? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I was like, it's not like I'm above this or anything. It was like, it feels like if that's the case, then I should be out there, like trying to like, support it in some way. I should be out there putting time, playing it. So I think when I saw that coming, for me personally, anyway, I was like, okay, cool. I was like, what is someone going to buy it and be like, hey, are you that dude? I guess, can you unwrap it now and sign it? And it's like, it's not like that wasn't like a thing that I was like, oh, I can't wait for this to happen. That was just more like it feels like I should be putting more time into it if it's made its way here and is, kind of that legitimized in a certain sense. So, and I think everybody probably had their different times, but that for us was, we were excited and we knew it was actually getting, like a push. So,
right. And so you had already signed with Hopeless at this point or no?
No. So we released Upsides on No Sleep.
Okay.
And pretty shortly after, basically, they had reached out to us and they came and saw us play at a small show that was, like packed. It was like a sold out show. It was only like 200, 250, people. But I mean, again, that's in no way nothing. That's a pretty significant thing, especially in our world. And it was, pretty raucous, and, managed to get a few of them from the label to come out, and they saw the energy that was already kind of there behind it and excitement. And they said, hey, we want to work with you. We think there's some really cool stuff happening here. And they decided to eventually, they re-released Upsides as like a deluxe edition. So is what happened. So it kind of went from No Sleep, and they took it and then re-released it. And then, and then,
I mean, that's huge. That must have been a huge moment for you. And at that point, is everybody like, okay, we got to quit our day jobs? This is it?
I think, well, we had already kind of been in on it and knew that meant, but it doesn't always, it's, again, like I said, it's not always like a flip the switch thing. I think there were even after that, we, came home and we were like, okay, we'll still like work a bit part-time, or, some people do things, but it wasn't like, none of us were like steering into, all right, I got to find like a real job 9 to 5 and do it. We were like, I should stay available because I think we're going to be touring a lot, and the next couple of years we're just that, So,
did they put you on the road right away to support it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we put ourselves on the road in that regard. They probably helped facilitate, or I think it's sometimes easier to convince another actor, another agent to give a younger band a shot if they know that a label is putting some resources and time and effort behind the promotion of that release or that artist at the time. But it also kind of just put us in front of, with the record out, put us in front of a lot of that audience that was existing there already. And that it kind of naturally happened to where eventually there was enough of a demand where people were like, we know that at least 30% of the people at these shows are really wanting to see your band as one of the openers. So come do the tour. It's and this is, it's kind of it's a leverage game, where I think that's the other thing that I consistently have a conversation about with a lot of younger and very green artists in this climate is, don't just record a bunch of songs and then have let me shop this to a label and that's how I will flip the switch and then everything will fall into place. Go out and create some of your own leverage and start and prove and act as though there is no label coming. And then before you know it, if a label does come in, it'll come into a point and they will be coming in because they already see that groundswell and that organic following happening. And then you're like, well, I don't fully need you, but you could structure something to help me do X, Y, and Z, to kind of pour more gasoline on this fire and support it. And that's, that was kind of what happened there, where they helped us understand and gave, lent some perspective, some of which we kind of pushed back on at, in any true, artist label dynamic, but it was helpful. And I think it's turned out to be overall a beneficial relationship for us. And sometimes that's not the case for bands, but we've steered into it and we've always had the heaviest guide of what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go with our band. And it's been a trust building exercise over the last decade with them,
For sure. What would you say the next milestone for the band would be? Signing to Hopeless has got to be one of the big ones, and then supporting that record. What would you say next in line? Where was your next little spike?
Yeah, I think probably getting into the fold of starting to do Warped Tour.
Okay.
With Suburbia, the next record after that, from a touring standpoint, that kind of was the beginning of a lot of a crazy whirlwind of us ending up on support tours with, bands from Newfound Glory, Yellow Card, that had been those torchbearers in that very pop punk centric world. And that those are the things that kind of snowballed to where, we were on tour for 10, 11 months collectively out of the year for a really, and we were into it. We were ready to take it on. And those were probably the things that, that came next. It was just heavy touring opportunities because we were, building a value, so to speak, in the marketplace that a lot of other bands were like, well, will come be part of our team and our tour for this, and we can kind of do that. So that was probably the next one where, getting put in front of that many people in that world and also having grown up and been very familiar with the Warped Tour brand.
Sure.
That gave things a pretty big shove. Yeah.
Would you say what would you say the band that kind of came, or is there a band that came to you early on that you played with and it was oh my, I cannot believe, I mean, Newfound Glory and Yellow Card probably are up there, but we get to tour with blah, blah, blah. Is there one that comes off the top of your head?
Yeah. It's interesting actually. So both of those, we're pretty big in that world for sure. But then we did do a short tour. There's a publication in the UK called Kerrang Magazine, and they were doing the Kerrang tour every year, and they would have a different headliner, and they invited us to do it. And It was actually a year that we spent touring a ton all over. We like with a band called 4 Year Strong, who was doing a lot of things in the genre at that time. But headlining the tour, they had Good Charlotte, which
Oh, wow.
days of like MTV, who was still like putting out records, but also even in the early 2000s, had been a very big staple of things in that punk world that were showing up on MTV and TRL. And so, they had like, they were kind of a great example of that, like very widespread visibility of our world in touching on the mainstream. Right. So that was an interesting one, especially too, being like, you guys are straight up married to celebrities, like,
Right.
yeah. But it was so fun. And those guys are so down to earth, and they, and that was honestly a really good experience. There have not always been super glowing experiences with touring with, some of the bands that you look up to and idolize. I'll be completely honest with that. But that was a really good one and a really positive one for us. We're like, man, you guys are you're doing okay financially. You've built a brand. They've been really smart with the way that they've done it. And I think everybody, I remember everybody being like, Good Charlotte? You guys are touring with, like some of them being like, whoa, that's crazy. And others being like, isn't that lame? Like that's not punk. I'm just like, dude, honestly, these guys are more fucking punk than you could ever be in 100 lifetime, and I'm like, and just the way that they thought about it, and the way also, as in, I forget if we opened the tour or where we were in the bill, but like, they didn't have, for all intents and purposes, you can just be on your bus and never talk to anybody, go walk on stage, do it and go off. And they, a couple times went out of their way to like be cordial and sit and like share space and have a conversation with us. And A, that meant a lot. And B, those kind of things get baked in and passed down to how we viewed touring as a band. Because then now, for many years, we've been charged with putting together our own headline tour packages and picking support that we really like and want to put in front of people, and knowing how to treat them right. Because we've also been treated not so nicely in certain support situations, or heard horror stories in that regard. And they were one of the big things where it was like, listen, if Good Charlotte can be real as fuck with us, and take a second or two, and also just have like we were playing like a role-playing game, like card game at the time. And we were like, they're definitely too cool for school. And they walked by the green room and they're like, are you guys playing werewolf right now? Holy shit, dude. We do that. We like put all the lights down. I have a bunch of people over the house when we're home, and I'm just like, get out of here. Like there's no, and that's the thing. It's like, there's no way you could plan that kind of like, that kind of moment. Even if someone was trying to manufacture, like, how am I going to like get these guys to like think we're cool and down? It's like, no, like they were that many years later, still managed to figure out, against many odds, how to have a head on their shoulder, and we that made a big impact on us, and so that's probably one of my favorite memories, is that Kerrang tour for that reason.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear, because like you said, people are like, oh, that's lame, and it's like, these guys are doing what they love. They're in the genre, and they've obviously built like brilliant businessmen, right? In that sense, like it's like Blink. Blink is their businessmen that knew exactly what to do. They knew their lane, and they stayed there, and they just blew up. And there's only a handful of bands that were like that.
Right. And Travis Barker is doing it all over again right now with his whole stable of bands that he's producing and bringing to the forefront of a whole resurgence of that. You know what I mean? He's no idiot,
No, not at all.
Like these guys are smart. And I think that was the first time too, where they're just like, you can be a punk, but you can also be smart and a genuine, like, business-minded individual as well. They're not mutually exclusive, and that was really cool to hear and see firsthand as an example that we've that's kind of been pretty heavy-handed in our ethos as a band before then, but also then since then, when you have solid friends and acquaintances like that can kind of display things with their actions, not just what they say, which is cool. I mean, I'll remember even just like one more thing that it blew my mind. It was like, they were walking around and we were just like, hey man, I got to ask you, like, you guys are wearing like Good Charlotte merch like every day. Like, what's up with that? You're wearing your own band's merch. They're just like, dude, this is our brand. Like, if you built a clothing brand, wouldn't you wear it and be proud as hell of the brand? It's like, what, like, look at anybody else, any other CEO of a clothing line. It's like, they're wearing their stuff. Like, they are the walking like representation of, I believe in this wholeheartedly. So why would wearing your own band's merch be any different? And that to us was just like, I mean, I'm not going to wear my band's merch, but like, when you say it like that, it's so clear, you know what I mean? It makes so much sense. And immediately I was just like, dude, these guys are on another level. They do not give a fuck. And that's incredible. And also a great testament to be like, hey, when people are like, what's your favorite band? It's like, this is kind of an insane, like, serial killer answer to give, but I don't know, my band, because why it should be, you know what I mean? Like, cause you get to make the exact music you want to make, you know? So I love that. And I had to share that as well. Cause that was,
no, that's so cool. That's so cool to hear. I mean, when I think of the TR, like not the pioneers, but like the biggest bands in that genre at the time, it's the bands that were there on TRL. You had Simple Plan and you had Good Charlotte and Blink. And I mean, Yellow Card had a huge presence on there. And you think of those bands and it's like they did something because they're very smart and strategic about what they were doing, and that's how they made it there. It wasn't just like the guy from MTV was like, oh, this is kind of a cool pop song, let's put them on the, you know, TRL.
That's right. Yeah. And to be fair, in that era, they had a lot of people that were throwing a lot of resources into things that were good, like that were quote unquote hit songs, into bands that knew who they wanted to be, you know. Good Charlotte knew who they wanted to be, you know what I mean? Like, because that was how they grew up. So even though like, you know, the songs about getting bullied in high school, it's like that shit was real because they straight up were those people in Maryland. You know what I mean? Like, people were like, oh, this is so lame and fabric. It's like, no, honestly, the reason it resonated is because there were punks in every high school that were like, honestly, A, that riff is kind of low key heavy and sick. And B, I don't have Liberty Spikes, but I feel that way. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. They're totally, genuine to their brand. Now they're on TV and big and rich and famous or whatever, but they also were the kid getting bullied. And that was kind of where I was going with the chorus thing. It's like, yeah, those kids are probably the nerdy art kid is going to be the kid that's selling, you know, millions of records or doing these big cool things that are cool now, which maybe they don't look as cool in the moment.
Right. You know, I mean, again, this is a bad example in terms of like being cool, but like, be nice to that kid because he might be the next friggin' Mark Zuckerberg, and maybe it would be nice to be able to like have a chat with him about some idea, you know, like whether he be like hell bent on world domination and evil, or just be like, hey, you're a guy that happens to know about computer programming and I have a question about how that might apply to me. That might be nice, you know, instead of just being like, nope, now you're on my list and I don't like you forever, you know, because I think that's also, you know, just a good testament to being kind, you know, and not going out of your way to do that, because you never know who's going to end up where, you know, sure, call out bullshit when you see it. But, you know, you don't always know, you can't judge a book by its cover, and you don't always know what's behind someone. I'm sure there are plenty of people that are just like, wait, that kid is like now in a band that people like get tattooed on them.
Right.
Fair. Definitely, I wouldn't have read that as me either back then, you know, but that's sometimes how it happens.
I love it. With after the Good Charlotte Crank thing, you know, the band, I would imagine, just keeps building momentum. At what point is it like we get to do these big headline shows? There's people coming no matter where we are. We're not the support act anymore. Where did that transition happen?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like after Suburbia, it really started hitting, and that was kind of the era and the world where, you know, we started like selling out in advance the venues in our hometown that we grew up seeing all of the, you know, quote unquote huge bands in our world play, where we were like, oh my God, we just sold out the Electric Factory. That's where I've seen every single one of my favorite bands. And we just sold it out in advance. And then you walk in there when it's empty at load in and you're like, this thing is massive. And you're like, oh my God, 2,500 people care enough to like make time in their schedule to come pay for a ticket, come down to this, do the whole thing. That's wild, you know? And it's humbling to like stand on that stage and be like, I remember being the first time where I'm like, oh, this is the stage. It's like, there's nobody else up here. Like, there's nobody, like, our gear's not in front of anybody else's. Like, it's just us, you know, like, because before we'd been on some support tours, we're like, sure. But you're here to see Newfound. I get it. Like, some of you like this and are into it, but most of you are just like, shut up. I'm here to, you know, hear my friends over you and hit or miss. Right. But this was the first time where it's like, oh no, like, there's none of that. It's just, it ends with us. This is wild. And so that was, it was probably that world where, you know, we started having those realizations and then doing that and then realizing, oh, now we're like playing the venues in everyone's hometown that they go to see their favorite bands at. Oh, wow. That's kind of a mind warp, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you're their favorite band.
And we're like, right? Now we're their favorite band. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, you know, it was probably that. It's like putting it in that kind of nostalgic context in our hometown for sure.
Yeah, very, very cool. I want to skip ahead a little bit here to right before 2020 in the world shuts down. Are you guys on tour? Where were you at? Come right before we're all locked inside and have to learn this Zoom thing and get on TikTok.
Yeah, we were on tour. We're actually like out in the West Coast, and it was really, as you might imagine, it was a strange time because we were just like, you know, went from LA where I kind of woke up in front of the Fonda, went to the gym like it was a normal morning, came back, had a show, and I was like, what's this rumbling about this like COVID thing? And then like 2 nights later, we had, you know, or a couple nights later, we had just played San Francisco the night before and woke up and we're like, yeah, San Francisco just, you know, banned all gatherings above 250. We're like, if that show was a day earlier, it would have been canceled. Mm-hmm. And then we're sitting in Denver and and had some friends there, and we were at a bar getting some dinner like before the show, and it was like a sports bar. So there were like, you know, TVs like NBA all over. And I remember seeing something come across the ticker that was like NBA announces they will suspend, you know, the rest of this, you know, all further games. Mm-hmm. And then almost in an uncanny, you know, moment of timing, then I get a news alert on my phone that pops up that says, you know, American actor Tom Hanks test positive for COVID. And I was like, it's over. This shit, right. People love Tom Hanks and sports way too much. This is going to get serious really quickly. And it did. And then within like, I think 2 days, you know, we were like calling it quits and heading home and missed the last week of shows, which was like, you know, our hometown shows and all the shows in the Northeast. You know, which we were obviously very excited about because up until then that tour was going very well and we were having a blast. So it was a weird, strange time. And then everybody else lived it, you know, in their own way. I'm sure I won't bore people because everybody remembers how frantic and traumatic that period was. And that sense of unknowing, we were the same thing. We were, you know, all wandering around a parking lot, you know, outside the bus, calling people being like, I don't know what's happening. We're getting on a call with our agent in 10 minutes. Like, I don't know. Are we going to try to rebook? I don't know. And then like parents, family being like, I saw you guys cancel the rest of the tour. What's happening? And then me being like, you know, we're going to be home in 2 days. And then trying to like, you know, get everything situated from a quarantine standpoint. It all happened like the panic set in very quickly. And so obviously we wanted to be home sure. as quick as possible to sort all of that out. Cause we were like, well, we're wasting time if like the whole world's going to shut down. I kind of got to do a couple things first. So that, I mean, that was it. Yeah. So, it was wild, you know, and then, you know, trying to sort through and sift through everything else and figure out maybe like this summer we can do it again. And then I think I remember even having those conversations about rebooking the tour for like another 2-3 months, and I was like, in my head I was like, yeah, okay, like we'll do that, maybe, that seems like a good move, good solid move, right? Push it back. And I think in the back of my head I was like, I know this is going to be way bigger than that. I know that that there's probably a very good chance that this is not how that's going to go, but you got to try, and that's kind of the way the whole industry worked, where it was trying to be, cautiously optimistic. And you can't just be like, well, I don't know, once everything's back to 100% normal, then we'll figure this out. It's like, no, the industry, it's like we book tours like 8 months, a year in advance, and all this planning goes into it. So you kind of have to, the second one thing shuts down, the gears are turning for already what's next and how you pivot and getting that locked in. And we weren't the only one. Everybody was doing that, at the same time. So it was kind of chaos from that way. And it was just that way for 2 years.
And now we're still kind of sitting in it, right?
And now we're still kind of sitting in it, but we found a way that hopefully it's safe enough because we have other protections. We know a lot more about it. There's vaccines, there's way more protocols, and people, generally speaking, have a bit better of an understanding about it, and can make the choice to take the calculated risk if there is one, in certain places or not. And so we feel good enough about it, to go back out on tour, thankfully, for the tour that should have been happening a year and a half ago, that we kind of had on the books. So, but we're ready for it. And we're very optimistic about it, and have tried to put as many ideas and protocols in place to keep people safe. You can't control everything. You can't control the weather. You also can't necessarily completely control and dominate a global pandemic. So
right.
we're just one band, so we're doing it. If people don't feel comfortable, of course we get that, right? If people do and come there, we just, want them to know that we've done everything in our power from our standpoint to try and make it safe. And also know that you can't please everybody, but that's a lesson we've been learning for 15 plus years now. So, sure. But that doesn't mean you don't try to go out and please some, yeah. So that's where we're at.
The first tour that you've done since the canceled tour, and have you done any shows prior to that?
We have done. Okay. Yeah. So we did. Yeah. So we did like a handful of shows back in December, like some holiday shows, which went really well, which were so much fun. And that was kind of us dipping our toe back into what is touring in this climate feel like for us as a band, and and for other people, in like the Northeast where we did the shows. And we've done like 1 or 2 festivals, and we did the live stream thing. We did a Blink dueling like Blink 182 Halloween cover set thing.
Rad. What Blink songs did you do?
Well, we covered a lot because with a 6-person band, and because a lot of us are multi-instrumentalist,
you're able
to we actually split into Blink A and Blink B. So we had 2 bands
that's rad.
That kind of put a whole Blink set together, of like Blink A opens, Blink B is in the second slot, and then Wonder Years is in the headline slot for a stream. So it was fun. We did a bunch of the key songs that you would imagine, like First Date, Rockstar. And then we did a group Damn It to close out the virtual encore set with the whole band. So 3 guitar players playing one Damn It riff. It was great. Every band's dream, No, I want to play the riff. No, I want to play the. Okay, well, we'll all play it. You take the first measure, I'll take the second, and then we all come in on the third.
That's cool.
But it was funny for us, and even though we're much older than we were when we started out, you still got to have some of the jokes,
Got it.
So, yeah, so cool. we've done some of that over the last couple of years that kind of kept us sane, and kind of tried to give any fans at least something to hold them over, because it's not a 1-for-1 replacement for a live show experience. But yeah,
sure. Well, we're excited for the tour, and like I said, I'm going to be in Nashville when you play there.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. We are excited as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, dude, so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I have one more quick question for you before I let you go.
Absolutely.
I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Oh man. You've caught me at a time in my life where I seem to have almost too much and have to refine who and when I give it for where it's most relevant, I guess. But yeah, like I mentioned, interestingly enough, with the last couple of years, I've ended up doing some kind of like artist coaching and brand development stuff and touching on a lot of worlds. So I think one of the big things is if it's like truly a band and it's just starting out, trying to like find their sound and figure out who they are. I'm not the first person in any way to say this, but it really is a good, solid place to start, I think. And it's never a bad idea to put your energy and time into writing and just diving into the material making part of being in a band, because that's kind of where you make a lot of the mistakes. You figure out what you're good at. You figure out if it's multiple people involved, right? So say it's a band of 2, 3, 4 people. You figure out the cross section of all of the influences and where that band lives as an organism, not just where you're thought as the guitar player that loves Offspring and early Green Day lives, but also where the rest of the influences all kind of meet in the middle, and which elements of all of those are most important to the band and its creative identity, right? So that is something that you can only really find by writing a bunch of songs. And what I usually say is like, write bad ones, right? Have it be less about holding everything. And this is the first song the band's ever going to release. It's got to be perfect. It's not going to be. It's just not. You know what I mean? Like, also, it's all relative. What you think is a perfect song now, in 10 years, let me tell you, as a man that literally is about to go out and play 2 records worth of material, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to look back on that and be like, if I had a mulligan, that measure would be different, but it's okay because it's all part of the journey. And we wouldn't get to where we are with Wonder Years and how we write currently and how we function and have just made what I think, clearly biased, is the best Wonder Years record to date. If it wasn't for all of those other, things that in hindsight to you may be viewed as mistakes or less than perfect, but it's part of the journey. It's what, I love the idea of stand-up comedians talking about writing on stage, where they test out material, and especially now we're in a climate where, hey, if you put out a bad song, everybody else is putting out a bad song and it'll just get washed away. If you put out a good song, people are going to be like, oh shit, that band that put out a bad song, this song actually sounds great, right? So try to hold things less tightly and just figure that out. And also, all the songs you write, you don't have to release all of them. But the point is, you might have to write 10 bad ones to get to the one good one that you do want to put time and effort and money behind recording and releasing, So that's also, I think, maybe some solid advice. There's plenty more where that came from if anyone is ever interested for whatever reason. But I would say start there, truthfully, and that'll help define a lot of other things that are really important and set you apart as a band.